On Personally Speaking this week, our guest is Father Tom Gibbons, a member of the Paulist community. He's put together a documentary about those Americans who served as chaplains in the military. And did you know over 400 of these young men and women have died in the cause of protecting the spiritual lives of our troops? It's a fascinating interview. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Father Tom Gibbons joins me now. Father Tom is the executive producer of Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey, a powerful new documentary film that shares the stories of multiple U.S. military chaplains who died while serving. Fighting Spirit was co-produced by the U.S. Army Chaplains Corps, and actor Chris Pratt also was an executive producer on the project. Father Tom grew up in St. Lawrence Parish in Chester, New Jersey, and he currently serves as the vice president of Paulist Productions. He's a graduate of Loyola University of Maryland and was ordained with the Paulist Fathers in 2012. Father Tom is here with us today to talk about his life, his vocation, and the new documentary film Fighting Spirit, and why he wanted to tell the story of combat chaplains who are an example of people truly living their faith. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Father Tom Gibbons. Father Tom Gibbons is our guest on Personally Speaking. He's a member of the Paulist community. We'll talk more about that. And we're going to talk specifically about one of the latest things he's working hard on, which is a documentary called Fighting Spirits, which gets into the whole question of military chaplains, which certainly is something we all need to know more about. But Father Tom, before we get into that, I like background on how people get to be who they are and what they're doing. So this family of origin that raised you, was it nominally Catholic? Was it actively Catholic? What's the family community that you were raised in like spiritually?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we were pretty actively Catholic, but I wouldn't say militantly Catholic. It
Okay.
was just, I mean, there's gradations within that. We went to mass every Sunday, and I did
Hmm.
CCD and got all my sacraments. And I'm from the northern New Jersey area. My parents are from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So I think the where I grew up was the area in New Jersey. It was kind of like where a lot of the Irish and Italian Catholic diaspora moved out to the burbs. And so Catholicism was just kind of the norm. It's just what you did on Sunday. You didn't think about it, you just did it. And I won't say we had like a lot of shrines in our house that we were lighting candles to or anything like that, but
Right, right.
and I kind of sometimes joke it, not that this is completely true, but it's the high school I went to, or a lot of people were Catholic, and our neighborhood was very Catholic, so it was
Mm.
just kind of like, I went to public school, but it was a little bit like going to a Catholic school, because the majority, you still saw them on
Right.
you still saw them in confirmation class or CCD or what have you.
Right, right. My parents did the same. Everybody moved out of Brooklyn. In our case, moving to Long Island. But now, with the prices of homes in Brooklyn, we should have stayed there.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it's right.
it's
It's
big
right.
time now. Brooklyn is very popular, very much trendy, very expensive, as a matter of fact. Now, I mentioned in the introduction, Father Tom, that you were a member of the Paulist community. Tell us, of all the options, and for our listeners and viewers may not know, there's religious communities like the Paulists, like the Jesuits, like the Franciscans. There's also secular priests who belong to a particular diocese, which is what I am for the Diocese of Rockville Center. How, when you said, all right, I think maybe priesthood might be for me, did you specifically say, this community is where I'd like to serve?
Well, I think for me it was a long journey. So or I said, like, went to public school, like in high school. I went to Loyola College. Well, I should say Loyola University, Maryland. It
Right,
was Loyola
right.
College, Maryland, in Baltimore, Maryland, when I went there, which was a great Jesuit school. And then after college, I did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I had kind of really gotten a great appreciation for the Jesuit spirituality, for the Jesuit
Hmm.
approach. And it was after my JVC year ended and I was still living in Phoenix. And then I would go on to do some work with undocumented immigrants along the border in El Paso, Texas. But it was around then that I started feeling a strong call to the priesthood. That's something that it wasn't necessarily on my radar. It was, it was just something I felt like really strongly within. And all I'll say is it was not a welcome call. It took a little while at first, and I always kind of say like I had a very Jonah like experience with my
Mm.
call, and the Jesuits will say, "Oh, we want to discern God's will." It's like, "Oh no, I kind of had a sense what God's will was. I just," and when I talk about whenever I talk about like discernment or the vocational journey, I like to kind of say it's like what Richard Rohr will say. It's like that liminal space. Like some people may know when they're six, and God bless them.
Right,
And that's
right.
great. And for me, when I talk to men and women who are discerning any kind of vocation, I kind of say, it's that weird space between it takes as long as it takes, and when it's time, it's
Mm.
time. Along the way, I met the Paulist Fathers, and I always have to explain to people why I became a Paulist and not a Jesuit. And
Mm.
my shorthand is to say, I like to say a Paulist is a Jesuit who doesn't really want to go to graduate school. Um,
Well put, well put. Yeah.
but I mean, one of the things I really, when I discovered the Paulus, and it was just kind of as I bumped into a Paulus father in Baltimore, and they just kind of talked about their charism and their background, and we are the first Catholic men's religious community founded in the United States.
Hmm.
And so many of our religious communities have those European roots. And I just thought it was really interesting and attractive and exciting that, oh, here's a community that was founded in the United States. Father Isaac Hecker was a New England transcendentalist of all things who hung out with Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. And it was really kind of exciting to hear a Catholic origin story
Right.
with deeply American roots. And I'd always been very interested in media, and the Paulus had a strong media ministry.
Hmm.
So, and the fact that, so many of them were, we've got a really diverse community now. We've always had a little bit of diversity, but, so many of the people in our community were Irish from New York, and it was like, well, that's where all my family was from, so it was really kind of comfortable, and I liked, I kind of liked that we're all, for better or for worse, we're all just kind of a bunch of independent thinkers, and
Hmm.
it was just kind of a
Yeah.
neat tradition within the church. So I felt really at home, so that when the time came for me to choose priesthood, I kind of knew it was going to be the Paulist Fathers.
Father Tom Gibbons is our guest. And let me ask you this. You may not be able to answer it, but Father Tom, took his time and tried a whole bunch of other things and then came to this decision that God was calling to the Paul's community. But you're ordained in this century. I am ordained well into the last century. And I mention
Mm-hmm.
that because I hope this is your experience. There's not a day that I wake up that I don't know that by the end of the day, I will have made some kind of difference for the good and would have done something good with my life that helps people. And to get up every day and know you have found your meaning, I think is a wonderful life. So my question, which maybe you can or cannot answer, is I don't understand the so-called vocation shortage. I can't understand why people who are searching for meaning wouldn't say one of the most beautiful places to find your meaning is in priesthood or religious life.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, has it been that for you where you wake up every day saying, I like what I'm doing. I find my meaning in this work and I'm glad I did it. And then if that's so for you and me, why not for others?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things. I mean, and it has certainly been the case for me. I mean, there are times I just kind of sit back and it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe the life I'm living right now.
Yeah.
Like, and I have, it's funny. I thought, I have a lot of Catholic friends, and I have a lot of different religious friends, and I have a lot of secular friends. And even my secular friends are like, Tom, we can't believe what you're doing right
Yeah.
now. Like in a good way,
Right.
like in a really supportive way.
Now, Fighting Spirits, this wonderful, I want to get for our listeners and watchers, the subtitle is Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey. Why
Yeah.
did Father Tom decide he was interested in the unbelievably heroic work of over 400 chaplains who have served and died, thousands who have served and thank God not died? Where did this interest come from in you? I love it, but where from?
I've been with Paul's Productions for the last 8 years.
Hmm.
So, and our president, Michael Sullivan, who has a very long background in Hollywood. He was one of the creators of the old TV show Growing Pains. For those of you who watched primetime TV in the '80s, yeah,
Don't pick on
had a
us now, Tom. Don't pick on us, Tom. I'm very sensitive.
no, I'm there with you. I am there with you. No, I what just to go off topic for a sense, I'm kind of a Gen Xer, and I remember we were doing this vocation retreat a couple of years ago, and I was watching TV, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off came on, and some of the vocation prospects said, "What movie is this?" And
Ah,
I just buried my hands in my head. I'm like,
yeah.
no, no.
It's a great film.
Great film, I know. And so Mike Sullivan had always wanted to do. I thought it would be a great topic. Paulus, I like to say at Paulus Productions, our tradition is we create media that advances the conversation between the sacred and the secular.
Hmm.
We bring a Catholic voice to that conversation, but all people of goodwill are welcome to the table. And that's been our tradition throughout the 65 plus years of our work here at Paul's Productions. We did Father Bud Kaiser did the old television show Insight. And it was always, how do we kind of like open the space to kind of create that conversation? We're certainly going to share our perspective in the midst of that.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, Mike Sullivan said, hey, here are all these people, these military chaplains, that you've got Catholic priests and rabbis and Episcopal priests and Buddhist ministers and all
Hmm.
these different religious traditions, and they serve everybody. And what a great opportunity to kind of bring everyone together and have almost just like a basic faith conversation. And so that's how that started. And some really great people came on board. Rich Hall, who had a lot of experience, continues to have a lot of experience in Los Angeles, and in addition to a lot of business opportunities. He had done a film with Halle Berry about Black soldiers in the U.S. military's history, and so he became interested in this topic. And then we just got all these fantastic interviews, from priests and imams and rabbis about like all these great stories of all these that the military chaplains have done. And I think, kind of going back to your earlier question, I think one of the sad things with the decline in religion in general is that we don't have as much experience with ministers, with priests. And I think that part, sometimes, so that it's one of the reasons why we don't really have that in our collective not as many people have that in our collective imagination. So we wanted to really highlight people who were doing ministry, and heroic ministry, and to show the realism of how challenging that ministry can be, but also how inspiring that ministry can be.
Father Tom Gibbons is our guest, Paul's father, and we're starting to talk about this wonderful documentary about the chaplains who have served. But one of the things I think our listeners and viewers may or may not know is that when these guys and gals go out and try to give spiritual comfort to the soldiers they serve, they're going out there with whatever's in their hearts and souls, but no weapons. And they're going out to the battlefield where people are shooting at them. Where in the world does the either craziness or the spirituality come from in these guys to say, I'll walk out onto the battlefield with bullets whizzing around me. I'll give comfort to those who are sick or wounded or dying, and I'll basically be willing to sacrifice my life if that's what's necessary. You interview these people. Where does the courage come from, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, it's kind of like, those times I've worked in a parish and complained that we've got oh, how come we didn't get the right donuts after mass today? It's been kind of a nice. I've kind of had to ask myself a little bit of that, and I think there's like two things. One is, and one of the chaplains, Jeff Strucker, talked about this. Is one is like a really strong belief in God, and that we are. He, in the film, Chaplain Jeff Strucker talks about, I want to be here on earth for my family, but I also have a God who promises me eternity. And one of those things is having the long view. One of those things is really just saying, what our lives here are incredibly precious, but it's, as our Christian faith would say, it's not the end of the story.
Right.
Um, I think the other thing too is that, as all of us who are ministers, we are entrusted with a flock. And I think we feel very protective of our flock. We love our flock. And when we have that experience of being given a flock, we're willing to sacrifice for that flock, or we're willing to put ourselves out there for that flock. And we want to be where they are in order to in order to truly be present to them, and to be in those moments. And I think that
So,
has a
Tom, will
lot
you
to
have
do
that
with
kind
it.
of courage? Will you be willing to go on the battlefield?
Oh boy. I would, I'm a little bit of a, I'd like to say I'm a little bit of a coward. I'd like, I mean, sometimes we all have moments where we're, you read about the saints, and you read about people who are just say, hey, there's a particular moment where, we may have to put it all on the line. And we all like to think that we'd like to stand up at that moment, but we don't really know.
Yeah, until we're tested. A couple of years ago, there was a person who came in, kind of a crazy person, through our church. Mass was crowded, and people just froze as that person approached the altar. And finally, the ushers did interject, but not before she had gotten to the altar. And the deacon next to me said, "What would we have done if she had a gun? What would we have done if she had a gun?" I said, "Well, it's the job of the deacon to step in front of the priest." So it takes
Yeah.
something special to say, I'm willing to die if that's what it means. Now, one particular chaplain, and I've heard so much about him, but I want you to tell us why he was the focus of the film.
Yeah.
Tell us about Father. I don't want to say his name right. Capone? Is it Capone? Capone?
No, I'm chuckling because that's if there's any controversy in our film, it's how do you pronounce Father Emile Capon's or Capon's name?
Right, right. Well, how do
And
you? What do you think?
well, the thing is, no, and that continues to be the controversy where it's not Capone.
It's not.
It's not like Al Capone, like the
Right.
gangster. It's not that. No, but it's either Capone or Capon. And
Capon. And
so,
for our listeners who can't tell what we're saying, it's spelled Kapaun.
right.
And they say Capon, like the people closest to him would have called him Capon. And did
Some
you
people
say,
go back, they go back and forth. They
okay,
go back. Yeah. So it's I had the opportunity. Well, I'll tell you a little bit of the story, and then I'll kind of tell you
yeah,
why
yeah,
it's still a controversy. Is that, we were in the process of filming these great interviews about from all these different chaplains, throughout history, and people serving in the chaplain corps right now, but also throughout history. And then we are and Father Emile Capon, I'll just say Capon for right now. I'm not saying
right,
that's
right.
the official name, but Father Capon was one of those stories. The Catholic priest who was a chaplain who served with his men and his soldiers in the Korean War, got captured, insisted on staying with his soldiers, and died in the war, in the prisoner of war camp.
Yeah.
Who's now up for canonization. I believe he's currently servant of God. And so along the way, as we were kind of like just putting together all these stories, it came across the news that his remains had been identified after 70 plus years of being in the war camp. And so there was going to be a great homecoming in Wichita, Kansas, where he was from. And it was going to be a great celebration by the Diocese of Wichita and the Chaplain Corps. And so we are and so he is and so what happened was we were able to take a camera crew and go film the homecoming, and we realized that was going to be such an important part of the film. But I'm coming around to say that even during this huge beautiful liturgy that happened in the Wichita arena, that was just packed with
Wow.
Catholics and military observers and all that, I think it was the bishop or someone said, so there's a controversy. Is it Capon or Capon? And they were like, well, we don't know which one it is, so we're just going to go with Capon.
And you say it Emil or Emil?
I think it's Oh, there's another one. I don't know.
Now with this
My
film,
previous documentary was about Father Bud Kaiser. It's called
right?
Hollywood
That's pretty
Priest.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah, Bud. Okay, it's
Bud,
Bud.
Father Bud.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hollywood priest.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of interviewing Bud, and he was a number of times on our diocesan TV channel, which was called Telecare back then. But
Yeah.
a great man, the Hollywood priest. But let's go back to the documentary.
Sure.
One of the things that I was struck by was the executive producing role of Chris Pratt. Now, Chris is this unbelievably popular actor in Hollywood, but he's also strongly identified as a Christian, and for that, he has certainly gotten blowback. You're living out there, and we have so many actors and actresses on our program over the years, but time and time again, they'll kind of step back and not want to talk about their faith, and some of them will be honest, especially off camera, to say, it's just best out in Hollywood not to be identified as a religious person.
Mhm.
So Chris identifies himself as Christian unapologetically. Um, Tell us, first of all, in your experience working out there, do you find actors who are willing to step forward and say, I'm a person of faith, not ashamed to say it? In particular, with Chris Pratt, why did he say yes to doing this particular movie?
Well, I think it was a couple of reasons. He one, as you said, very faithful Christian.
Yeah.
That's kind of who, he's kind of been out there, is that his faith is a very strong piece part of who
Mhm.
he is. And then I think secondly, I think he just, and I think anybody who goes out and sees this film are really going to be inspired by the stories of these chaplains, men and women. And I think that's one of the things that we're excited. So many of us are excited, but we're especially excited that Chris has been able to kind of shine his light on this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that we're really excited because we've created a film that anybody can watch. You can be a faithful person and watch. You cannot be a believer and watch, and you're gonna be inspired, and you're gonna be inspired and say, "Hey, what makes these people tick?" And it really kind of, like in our best tradition, really kind of opens the door and welcomes everybody, but yet still communicates these basic gospel values and these
Hmm.
basic ministerial values that I think anybody can really relate to in a way that provides depth. And so that's kind of what we were all shooting to do in making this film, and having Chris on board has just been an incredible validation. Our director Richard Hall has said, in some ways it's kind of a superhero movie. So I'm like, well,
Yeah.
it's fantastic that we got an Avenger to sign up to be an executive
Right.
producer.
No, that's true. It's a wonderful thing to have his endorsement and to know he's behind it because he has, as you say, a great and popular following. Let's go back just for a second to the personal. Um, Everybody wants to have their parish priest. Everybody wants to know there are priests out there who do good work, whether it's a chaplain in the military or working in Paulist productions. All the Catholics want to have good priests. Everybody says the same thing. But again and again and again, I hear from parents basically another version of not in my backyard, somebody
Mm-hmm.
else's son. So let's go back to your family for a second. Father Tom Gibbons is our guest. Your parents going to lose a son to the priesthood, some people would say. How did they respond? Totally supportive or guarded?
No, I think I was really blessed in that, at the end of the day, and I think this is true for all of us, at the end of the day, my parents wanted what was best for me. And
Mhm.
when and my parents are religious. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
not like, I wouldn't call them overboard religious, but they've always been religious. Religion's always been a part of their life. And so, but I think at the end of the day, they wanted what's going to be best for me. Like, was this going to be the best life for me? And fortunately, I have two younger sisters who were also able to give them grandkids, so I'm sure that that covered the blow a little bit.
That took care of that
Uh,
particular
yeah,
need.
so
Yes,
he
yes.
kind of took care of that.
I want to move to a final question with Father Tom Gibbons, but before I do, since Father Tom touched on the various political points of view in the church, it's always important to say to our listeners and viewers, there is no political party that represents the fullness of Catholic moral teaching, neither one,
Correct.
and that's important. So we look at the individuals where they stand, and we try to,
Mm-hmm.
in good conscience, say, okay, what can I live with or not live with, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't belong to either party, and that's the way it's got to stay. Now, Tom, most importantly, because I want this thing to sell a gazillion tickets.
Yes.
If I'm listening and watching this program and I want to see the documentary Fighting Spirit, a combat chaplain's journey, how do we get to see the movie?
It is now in theaters as of today. So go to fightingspiritfilm.com, fightingspiritfilm.com. Run, do not walk. And if you go on the website, it's being distributed nationally in theaters across the country.
Okay.
If you go on that website, fightingspiritfilm.com, you'll be able to kind of enter in your city and find out where it's playing near you. It's going to be playing for this week. And, we just talked about the election a little bit. One of the great themes about the movie is one of the great themes is unity. Mm-hmm. It's like these are stories of chaplains who if you're a Catholic chaplain, you are serving the Jew, the Catholic, the Muslim, the atheist, the Buddhist in your unit. If you're the rabbi chaplain, you are serving the Catholic, the Jew, the Muslim. You're serving everybody. And I think, elections can be very divisive. And this is one of the things, in addition to celebrating veterans on Veterans Day.
Good way to bring us together. And it will eventually be available on streaming, you think?
We are working on that. We are working on that, but we really want to encourage people to go out in theaters, because the thing is, the more people that go out and support works like this, the more we'll be able to create. At the end of the day, Hollywood is the most capitalistic place on earth. That's what they understand.
Yes.
You just think, it's all liberal, it's all conservative. It's like, no, it's capitalistic. That's what it cares about. And if the films do well, and if we do well in the box office, that means we'll be able to have a better streaming deal. And so that also means we'll be able to put more films like this in theater. So come out and support the film. You won't regret it. You really won't.
I want to thank Father Tom Gibbons for being with us as a member of the Paulist community, as I said, and has put together not just this, but other films and other documentaries and about his own founder, as well as about Father Bud Kaiser. But Father Tom, I just want to say, for all the good news you gave us in this interview, you probably know this about yourself, but unless you took laughing gas before you came on the program, you are one joyful, happy guy. And it's just really nice to meet a priest who obviously likes what he's doing, enjoys people, tries to serve God, and is a happy human being doing it. And that's you. So Father Tom Gibbons, keep your joy and keep sharing it, because it's a great source of inspiration and encouragement to all of us. Thanks for being on Personally Speaking.
Oh, thank you so much, Monsignor. Really, really great to have this conversation and to be here.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me for any reason, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on the Catholic channel, 129. And you can do more than that. You can watch it as well on YouTube if you'd like, by searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. I'm delighted to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.